Um, hey friends, my name is Obinna Ekwuno, and I started this thing where like I like to introduce myself and my hobbies first before I tell you what I do for work. I love to make films. I try to make films, and because I like to express like how I feel and the state of like things around me, and I also try to learn to be a bartender. I'm learning to be a bartender, so I try to mix cocktails. If you're ever in Dubai, please let me know. I'd like to make you a drink. So I work at Gatsby as a software engineer on the acquisition squad at Gatsby. And I'm here to talk to you about the state of web accessibility in Africa. So to be honest, like when I submitted this talk, like I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to talk about because I wasn't sure where to start. I wasn't sure what parts of because it's really broad accessibility in Africa. Like, am I giving you statistics? Am I telling you like facts and all of these things? So I did what I would normally do when I'm starting a talk. I went to, and that's why there's no slides in this talk because I'll explain why. So I did what I normally do when I start creating a talk, and I just did a Google search to see, okay, what's out there, like what do people talk about when they say web accessibility in Africa. And then I stumbled upon a lot of research. Surprisingly, someone had thought about this, right? No, you say no shit, Sherlock. But then, yeah, I stumbled upon a bunch of like research of people testing out government websites and seeing what's the lighthouse scores were, how they created how they made the sites accessible, like testing it out with accessibility tools and all of these things. And to be honest, I wasn't shocked by their findings because this is like things that I already knew without even knowing that research existed. Now, like I said, I've wondered a lot of things. Like how do I deliver this talk that it is exciting for you and both give you like the reality of things. I mean, how do I speak for a whole continent, right? I'm a 24-year-old boy that's only been to 3 countries in 54, and I'm here to tell you about the state of accessibility in Africa. But hear me out. In this talk, I'm going to explain to you my own experience with web accessibility in the time that I was able to collaborate and also try to advocate for it in a system that doesn't really regard these things. I'll tell you why. Now, when some I just wanted to let them put it out there because mostly when people say Africa, they think it's one whole country that everybody's connected to each other. Yes, we're connected, but we're not all cousins. So I'm from Nigeria. I grew up in Lagos. I'm a huge Dave Chappelle fan, and I was watching some of like his old comedy series from like the Chappelle Show and to like the newest ones that he put out. And I realized that there was this article about Dave Chappelle saying, "Oh, how he went to Africa for 12 years." And I'm like, "Okay, Dave, like where did you go?" And he was like, everybody's saying how Dave Chappelle walked away from 50 million and went to Africa for 12 years. He was on exile. Dave, I saw an interview where Dave was like, I got there, these people took care of me. I'm like, okay, cool. But Dave, where did you go though? And and all I kept seeing was actual country did Dave Chappelle go to. And I saw that Dave Chappelle went to South Africa. I'm like, okay, cool. This dude went to South Africa. That's okay. And you might wonder, okay, where's this story going? But it will make sense at the end. Like I'm trying to give you like a real life experience of just me and web accessibility. Think of this as a talk show with Obinna, right? So, um, I googled and I found out where Dave Chappelle went to for 12 years, right? Cool. But these are the main takeaways from my story. The first one is that I'm privileged enough to have internet and actually Google. Yes, privileged. I say privileged because as long as so I've lived out of Africa, out of Nigeria for like a few months now, and the thing that excites me the most is how fast the internet is. And it's exciting when you see things that aren't like normal. So some people around like different parts of the world, like I work for Gatsby. I've worked there for like a year. I work with people from different sides of the world, and then sometimes you hear like people saying, oh, they have really fast internet. These things used to feel very alien to me, because I'm used to just cussing out the network providers and saying, oh, these people, their services are not really nice and all of that. But I have the privilege of checking out the internet and finding the information that I was looking for, because this information was made accessible to me, because I had the resources at my disposal to track down the information I was looking for. I know that, and another thing is that I know, like, knew how to find the information, right? I knew where to look for it. I passed through like all the articles that were saying African. I was like, where did he go exactly? Checked his net, all of those things, because I knew where to look for it. And I'm in a place where like I can use all my senses to process this information. This is good. But see, I'm from a part of like the world where not everybody's as privileged as I am. And it's important for us to realize that most of the services that we build are used by people, millions of people across the world. And if you stay in where you are and try to imagine how other people across the world like view things without actually being immersed in their culture, or trying to find out how they use your products around where they are, you probably just build something that you think you're building for other people, but you're just building for yourself. I'll give you one quick example. If you build something, if you build like an application, there was this one time when like a lot of the times I would see on the internet about PWAs and progressive web apps, and how people build applications for low data usage, users that have low data, right? Now, seeing those kind of applications just made me think of, oh, how awesome this would be if everybody in Nigeria, for example, I'm trying to not say Africa, but in Nigeria, for example, used these methods to build applications. This would mean that for every time that somebody would load information from the internet, it would there are certain files that are maybe like very large that they will only have to load once. So they don't have to do this all the time. This would really help somebody in Nigeria that has like probably 9 Mbps per second. It's it, it, it's very rare to see that around here. Like currently my internet is of 500, and I'm always like, oh my goodness, this is nice, right? But then not everybody is privileged enough to have access to the internet. And when it comes to like how we build stuff, I'm also from a place that you would think that because of the way things are, people are trying to make it better. But then and I'm going to be real. The reality is that it's sad when you talk about home like this, but we have pretty shit leadership. Pardon my French, but we have pretty bad leadership and very low power supply, and people are still trying to solve their basic needs, like and we're trying to still hack those out. So if you're still trying to understand like like if you're coming from a place where, just put yourself in my shoes, if you're coming from a place where like electricity is not something you see like 24 hours. It's not like there's no electricity. There is electricity. It's not terrible, right? But like it's not the thing that you would consider normal. How then do you solve problems that are then you see problems like web accessibility, or making people, making the web for everyone? It sounds very alien to you. It sounds very, what are you even saying? Like we have other problems. Like we're not, these are first world problems that people make up. But then I'll tell you another story. There was this one time when I tried to have a conversation with, the first time I heard of web accessibility, right? I was in uni. I was trying to like build out stuff, I was learning HTML, and I learned CSS, and I was like, yay, I'm a web developer. I'm building like awesome things. But like all I was doing was just, doing some HTML, some CSS. I felt really cool. I went home and I met my grandma. Like my grandma used to live with us, and I met my grandma, and I'm like, hey grandma, look at this nice thing I built. And she was like, yeah, sure, sure, sure. And then I showed my grandpa something I built that was like, so I obviously your first take of CSS is like, it's not really your best. So you probably have like a lot of colors that are not supposed to rhyme together. and then I had those colors like scattered around, and I had this part of the website that was like red text. Like I don't know what I was thinking, but every time I look at that website, I'm like, oh my goodness. But I remember, and this didn't occur to me until years later when like I showed my grandpa, and he was like, "Oh, why is everything one color?" And I was like, "Okay, cool." I mean, it wasn't one color, but like my grandpa was seeing one color, and it didn't occur to me until years later that my grandpa is actually colorblind. And in my mind, I'm like, "Oh, if I knew that at the time, I would probably be looking for ways to implement or try to like, okay, how do I make him see the things that I mean, at least perceive the things that I'm trying to communicate with what I'm building." Now, the first problem is the lack of information, that you don't know that you don't know. And I've been in this state, and the only reason that there are like three stages of like learning. You don't know that you don't know, and then you get to know, then you know. So I finally got to like the second stage of like, oh, I don't understand this, and I'm trying to like learn this. Um how do I teach these things, or how do I meet people and learn more so I can take back home or take back to my friends? The problem now is the people that you're trying to talk to are probably not willing to listen to you. They're probably because they don't understand what you're talking about. And I found that this problem is not peculiar to this part of the world. In our industry, like I see most people at like, oh, web advocates, web accessibility advocates, and people usually just, there's always a lot of tweets about web accessibility is not an add-on, is important, is this, and I'm like, oh, cool. If the people that are writing like the specs and like, you know, learning these things like in real time, or have like some of their issues like sorted out, they still need convincing, then what about people that are still trying to solve like the most basic human problems? They probably need more convincing. So how have I and most of people that from around from my part of the world, how have we tried to teach people about these things? We've we've tried by we've tried by learning like things from your, like from the web accessibility guide. We gotten like courses, or privileged enough, not are privileged enough to work in like situations where like maybe for example you earn enough to buy a course that will teach you something, and then you learn that course, and then you go back home, and then you talk to people about it and all of those things. But they don't want to they don't want to learn. And my first experience with, like I said, my first experience with accessibility was finding out that my grandpa couldn't see the colors of the thing that I was so excited to show him. And then one day, a while like later, I was working in a team where I was trying to explain. Oh, look, there's this one time I showed my grandpa this thing and he couldn't do it. Why don't we try to implement? Because it was like I think we're building out an e-commerce channel. I was like, why don't we try to implement like tags to tell people the actual colors of stuff? And you know, some of the images didn't have like all tags. And really, when people think of accessibility in the sense of it, we make it as it comes off as complicated as it's not. So we kind of just make people feel like, oh, this is something, an extra thing that I need to do. But I found that it comes down to just like telling people, okay, use the correct syntax for this part of the project. Like don't make divs everywhere. If you put an image, put an alt tag. If you're making a form, put a label. If you're going to use a link properly. If you're going to use a button properly. And this is how I found to explain things to the people around me and people in my community. Really just telling them, hey, look, if you're building this thing, like build this in this kind of way. But note that, again, like I said in the beginning, we don't have laws that make us do anything. Now, the thing that I found in my experience of like working outside of where I'm from is that most people implement accessibility not because they care about it, but because if they don't do the right thing, they get sued. So people don't want it to touch their pockets. People don't want to people because they have a horse in the race. So they take more care of it. And this made me wonder, what if I could convince people in my area that when you're building these things, if you think of it as you're building for yourself, because I read a blog post that said that the average web accessibility expert is older than the average um, web developer web developer expert. The reason, and they went, and I was like, oh wow, okay. And they went further to explain that the reason for this is your empathy grows with age. The more, like, for example, if if I was trying to like solve something for myself, I'll probably pay more attention to it. If I knew that I had like low vision and then I wanted to build a platform, I'll probably need to reduce like the if okay, for example, if the brightness of my monitor affected my eyes every time, I probably need to like maybe reduce the brightness because it's for me. But then in that case, I'm also making it. I'm also making the screen more comfortable for people around me if they also have those conditions. But I didn't solve it with for them in mind. Like I solved it for myself. So the way I found to like help people or explain to people is like, okay, if you build this thing in this way, one day you probably don't want to read a whole blog post by yourself. You want somebody to read it out to you. You can use a screen reader. There's this add-on that I found for an extension in Chrome that's called, I think, podcast. It's one-time setup in podcast app. So what it does is it takes a blog post and it turns it into a podcast. So you don't have to like listen, you don't have to read everything, you can just listen to it. But one day I used this to turn one article I found on a government website to a podcast, and then it was really not it was really I'm not going to call the name of I'm not going to say the name of the government because it would just shade them. But it was calling out things that like it's not supposed to be used for the user is not supposed to really know is there. So my the one takeaway I want you to have in this is like in this part of the world where we don't have any laws, the way we try to convince people to build out stuff is by explaining to them that, hey, look, if you build stuff that is better that is more accessible or better for people that have like disabilities or can't use the web as you would normally use it, then then you have like more users. And also, if you're building out stuff, you're building it in a way that is for yourself in the long run. In the long run, it's you. You're doing it for yourself, and and the way that you can help in this situation is like, so most of the contents that I found were gated. Like they had like pay. I mean, I know I make content, so I know it's strenuous to like make educational content, but at the same time, like it's also nice when like people can have access to these things, because in the long run we're doing all of this for ourselves. So if you keep sharing like your knowledge, whatever it is that you learn, like just tweet about it. Say, hey, look, check out this tool. This helped me with this. This helped me like crawl the site and point out a lot of accessibility errors in this. By enforcing the community, you're also enforcing like people to care about these things. People like to these days. I find that people like to hop on trends. So like what's maybe not a trend. I hate to refer to accessibility as a trend, but then if I'm doing it, your friend is doing it, this person is doing it, fear of missing out will probably catch up to you. So I think I've exhausted all my talking points, but I just wanted the key takeaway from this talk is the more we share, the more we empower our communities to build stuff that, especially in areas that nobody forces you to do anything. The more you share, the more you empower these communities to share and build accessible sites. So yes, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you and great job, Obinna. We do have some time to dive into questions now. So let me grab some questions here. Are there any recent developments in accessibility that you're excited to see in African countries?
Yes. We have like some, for example, people the kind like people are more interested in it these days because you have more like people understand the trade-offs and the benefits like by more education. Like so now they're more interested in learning how might we make this platform better, how can we change our practices to make this better. So more people just talking about is it's just it's a starter until like the actual policies in place. So yeah.
Great, thank you. In the US, we have laws against discrimination of people with disabilities, and the ADA ensures that physical spaces are accessible for all. Are there similar laws in Nigeria?
Well, no. We don't have those laws, and that's like one of the problems, right? But we and mostly, yeah, we don't have those laws, and that's like one of the major problems. But mostly like we try to. I mean, I try to, and I know that there's a friend of mine, Shegwala. I know he's giving a talk today. He also check like he calls himself an accessibility nuisance. He makes noise in whatever company he's in, or whoever. Like we have like if you're talking to your fellow developers, you're like, hey, implement this, do this. Try. Why don't you try this out? It'll be fun. I can help you do it. So we don't have the laws, but we try to make it a thing that people would want to do.
Great, thank you. Um, which countries in Africa do you think are leading in accessibility compliance?
Oh, Rwanda is because their government website is accessible. Like I love it, and also I see South Africa really doing because most of the studies that I saw really just focused on South Africa and is that Kenya? So yes, and then I know that there are some conferences that go. There's a conference that goes on teaching people how to implement accessibility. Their platform, I think, is sponsored by um I forget the name of this institution. Yes, Web Accessibility Initiative. They're doing like a great job with empowering these communities. So you have like some communities on Facebook. So yeah.
Great, thank you. We have one more question here. It says, I used to live in Fiji where people have jumped almost directly to smartphones. Have you found it similar in Africa, or are the phone networks as unreliable in places as the internet and electricity?
Yeah, so there's like most people like almost everyone has a smartphone. Like most people have like smartphones, and most people access like get to the so you're more likely to see someone with a smartphone than a computer, right? And so if you're trying to build applications that are used like globally and stuff, I think mobile first is a good way to check that to it's a good way to like start building. And also if you're also building, notes that like the cost of data is like it's really expensive in a way, like with looking like the kind of the income that people have, and then the cost of internet, and then yeah, most people have smartphones, and then you can always like put that in mind when like building out stuff and making sure that people in these regions are able, or just implementing like a PWA with your application, making sure that people in these kind of regions don't have to always request like data like all the time when they're using especially because they're using smartphones. And when I say smartphones, I don't mean iPhones. Like most people don't have iPhones because yeah, there was this one embarrassing time when somebody was at a conference and they said, "Oh, if you have," because this person was trying to explain a payment platform, and they said, "Oh, let me raise your iPhones up." Like everybody, and everybody's looking at him like, "Okay, we don't have iPhones," you know. So
Another question here. Do you have any insights about accessibility challenges within higher ed institutions across the continent?
oh yeah, I can speak for higher education institutions like in Nigeria, because like I went to uni there, and um it's pretty hard. Like even besides like outside the web, like you can even see like buildings and stuff, and like the wheelchair ramps are not a thing. Like most people don't. Like I do know that there was this one student that had there were braille like textbooks for him. He was blind, and then there were books for him to like read. But in my experience, there are schools that teach people, especially when like people that were born blind or people that have like these visual impairments, to be able to empower them to have like an education and empower them to have like skills. So I visited one school that taught people to read like braille, and then taught them how to use like we went to donate like laptops for them to be able to install softwares that would help them to access the web. And yeah, so there are initiatives in place to make things better. And yeah.
Thank you. Do you think that there are any particular struggles that disabled users in Africa face that we should keep in mind while designing websites?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, like I've been hammering on, is the size of like the files that you send to user, like making sure that your platform is maybe a PWA, for example. Also making sure that excuse me. Yeah, make sure your platform is a PWA, and also making sure that you're able to um check mark like most of your accessibility practices. So if like the major things that you would do to make a site like awesome is good everywhere, right? But then in certain parts of the world, like you need to check, okay, cool, what's like the internet speed there, right? Like, you know, like those kind of things are the things that I like to check if while making these things out.
Another question here, recognizing that many people may not have access to them, are there public websites created on behalf of the government that could be made more accessible?
Well, I put out a tweet a few days ago saying, "Oh, please, who can link me to the Nigerian website, like government websites?" And somebody linked me to the website, but then at the same time, it wasn't accessible. Like links, I was trying to tab through. Usually, I just do like a test. Like, it's just a fun thing, like tab through the site, see what hits you, test it out. It wasn't really accessible, so. And I'm not really sure the process of creating these websites. So I usually try to check out government websites, because that should be the that should because I check out like the UK government website a lot, and I see that they even have an accessibility statement, which is something I love. But then at the same time, like most of these government websites are not equipped to enable everybody have access to them. And even like me, like even some of the websites don't even have like that much information to even they don't have the information to empower people with the tools that they need to succeed. Like people that can even like maybe look, use the web as they intended it to be, right? But then they don't have that information for me. Then I, you know, it's terrible.
Another question is, what advice can you give a developer with understanding that we should not just think about the user interface, but also focus on the user experience?
Yeah, I so the thing that I keep telling myself, because I realize that, like I said, if you have a horse in the race, you're probably most likely to pay more attention, right? So think of it like, think of these users, like test out these. There are a lot of tools that help you test out things in the eyes of these users. So if you, for example, there's this tool I have that's called No Coffee Visual Simulator. You can check a color contrast loss. You can see what somebody that has like blurry vision will look at a site in. Like you can make out these. You can check like color deficiencies, like um achromatopia. You know, you can check out all these things and see how it would look for these users, and then try to put in place things to fix this. So always put yourself in the shoes of the user. And I keep saying these things because, like, to be honest, I'm no expert. Like I'm learning, I made that very clear from the beginning. I'm learning about these practices. I'm trying to influence my people to learn about them. And then the way I feel about it is like a domino effect. So if I and Shegu have this conversation, Shegu and somebody, I use Shegu, I'm sorry, but like I use Shegu because I chat to him about all my accessibility problems. But if I chat to Shegu and Shegu talks to somebody else and somebody talks to somebody and somebody talks to somebody, like that's how you get it going.
Great. Are there globally available user testing platforms of that involve folks from Nigeria or Africa more broadly?
Not off the top of my head. Like what, testing platforms? Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Let me pull it back up. Are there globally available user testing platforms of that involve folks from Nigeria or Africa more broadly?
No, I'm not like I'm not sure. But if I see, I mean, if you ask, if you now you've said it, I should probably take a look.
And then, in addition to what you've already mentioned, what are other ways that we can create a more optimal experience in accessibility scenarios related to infrastructure or access issues, such as having slower internet bandwidth?
Well, make use of like an offline first like way of building stuff. I would a quick plug for me is like make use of PWAs, especially with like regions that have like don't make people fetch data all the time, like data that they don't need to fetch. You can use like stuff like static site generators to build, which is nice. So yeah.
Another question just came in. What is your experience with the needs or challenges with localization?
We which wait my experience with localization like making okay so do you mean localization in like Nigerian languages or like what? Like what do you mean?
Um, we can maybe address
Because
that.
yeah, we had this one dev that tried to make it possible for people to write JavaScript in Nigerian language, and he called it Yoruba lang. So this really just made it able for because the official language of Nigeria, most countries is English, right? But then we also have like our own languages. So it made it possible for people to write like programs in that language in our local languages, and that was good.
All right, and then I think that is it for questions. And that will conclude our session. Thank you so much, Obinna, for a great session. And thank you to everyone for attending. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of AXCON.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. Take care.
Thank you.